Welcome to another episode of Unexpected Perspectives. And today we are going to be discussing the evolving role of the CISO. I'm really pleased to have with me today a good friend of mine, Owanate Bestman. Welcome,
Hi.
Owanate.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's good to be here.
No, it's great to have you here. Maybe just for our viewers and listeners, so would you like to just give us a brief introduction?
Sure. I am founder and director of a cybersecurity and technology risk search and selection firm called Bestman Solutions. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is I speak with security leaders and potential security leaders, get to understand what makes them tick, what they're looking for in the next move, and hopefully be in a position to present that to them. And on the flip side of the coin, I speak with CTOs, CIOs, chief risk officers, many people with a C in the title, and identify the right individuals for them to take their organization forward, usually in the form of a CISO or a technology leader.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you for that. And maybe we should just try and demystify one or two of these terms. But
Yes.
in particular,
Yes.
CISO.
Okay.
What is a CISO? What does that mean to you?
So, a Chief Information Security Officer is a senior executive in an organization who is tasked with setting and delivering the strategy to help protect the organization's assets, information, technology, and often people.
And who needs one of those? who would typically need a CISO?
I'm tempted to say every organization needs a CISO, but they don't really. Every organization needs a security presence. Now, CISOs, especially good CISOs, aren't cheap. And when you think about it, 99% of organizations in the UK, 99% of the organizations in Europe, actually not just UK, but Europe and US, are actually classed as small organizations, small entities. And that's less than 250 people, and the majority of them are actually less than 100. So it's not necessary for an organization of that size or lack of to have a CISO necessarily, or at least a full-time CISO. There are other alternatives such as a fractional CISO, a CISO who can share their expertise across multiple organizations, across a different time scope. Then we have virtual CISOs as well, almost like CISO as a service. More important than actually having a CISO is actually having a sound security culture that doesn't always necessarily need to mean a CISO is suitable for a particular organization.
So when you are helping organizations, I suppose, identify and place CISOs, what are the expectations of those different type of organizations, and are they realistic?
Right. Okay.
To store points there?
Yes. Well, it depends when, and by that I mean they typically reach out to me with a brief, and by the end of my conversation with them, that brief has changed. Okay. Because what I find is that, I mean, you asked me what is a CISO, that's not always as transparent to some organizations as it should be. A lot of people misunderstand CISO as looking for a head of security architecture or a head of security operations, but they can stamp the CISO title on it. So I go into these organizations and I try and educate them, really understand what they're truly looking for. And a lot of the times their expectations are unrealistic. We've all seen it. We've seen specs abhorrent specs that talk about very technical hands-on skills that is not appropriate for a CISO to have. One of the things I see that isn't as terrible as some of the specs out there is be able to review high-level and low-level designs. A CISO shouldn't be doing that. CISO should be hiring people to do that. So to answer your question, their expectations a lot of the times are very unrealistic, but it's all about how open they are in speaking to an expert and identifying how that can be addressed. Sometimes they don't need a CISO. Sometimes they need a head of security architecture. Sometimes they got a head of security, but I advise them put the CISO title on it because your responsibilities do carry the weight of a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer.
And when you're talking to these organizations, and obviously you're educating and guiding them, which sometimes I can imagine can be quite a challenge.
Yes. It is. It's quite funny because I think you need to come to those conversations, not necessarily myself, even though I'm a humble person, but the person I'm speaking to, the client, needs to come with an element of humility to say, you know what, this isn't my area. And even, in many cases, the C-suite exec, I thought I knew security, but the security or the CISO role you knew 2 years ago is not the same CISO role it is now. The expectations you had 2 years ago, the candidates you were seeing 2 years ago, the remuneration you were paying 2 years ago is not the same as it is now. So like technology, ironically I say like technology because a CISO is not a technical role, it's a leadership role, but like technology, it's constantly evolving, it is changing. So the way I'm able to articulate that to my clients is really by evidence-based, sometimes presenting profiles, anonymous profiles. This is the kind of individual you're looking for. Well, this is the current package. What are you going to do about that? Really? You want tier one? All right. Well, you want the world, but you've got the budget for Croydon. Well, let's, all due respect to Croydon, let's address that.
Okay. It's quite interesting. Well, if we turn it around, then obviously we're looking at it from a client side. What about from the candidate side, or someone who is going into a CISO? Are their expectations realistic when they come to you and say, obviously I'm CISO material?
Oh yeah. I get this a lot, and it can be a bit of an awkward conversation. Let me tell you, the worst way to start this kind of conversation, where I just sigh and think, this is going to be awkward, is let's just say I have someone that's contracted, maybe a senior architect or even a senior GRC person. They've contracted for the last 10 years. They're used to earning a certain remuneration. And they say, you know what, I think it's time for me to go perm. I want a CISO role. Can you, find me a CISO role? And I think, all right, well, let me throw this back to them. Have you dealt with budgets before? No? Okay. How are you with reading financial spreadsheets? Oh, okay. How are you with managing a team? Oh, okay, you managed a few people. And how are you with appraisals? How are you with disciplinaries? How are you with liaising with senior board members? How are you with articulating risk, not in terms of technology, but in terms of the business implications? And it's a case of, all right, I don't have that, I don't have that, I don't have that. So the perception of what a CISO is often skewed.
That's a good angle as well, because certainly from my experience in the contract market in particular, that's not to say there aren't leadership positions within the contract market.
Definitely, and there are contract CISO positions, definitely. I just want to make that clear.
But it is very much it's almost like the inverse of a permanent market, where within a permanent market, perhaps you get more exposure to the business side.
Yes, and not to make it too contract heavy or too contract centric, because a large majority of my revenue comes from contractors as well. That's why I'm able to speak of this topic. But with contracting, sometimes you do sacrifice something, and one of the things you tend to sacrifice usually is career progression, unless you are an established CISO, contracting CISO, and there are a number in the market as well, and they know who they are. But I think I'm addressing the people that look to become CISOs without really understanding what that role entails, and they look to become CISOs because from their understanding it's the highest paid position in security. It's also the most senior for a reason,
and also sometimes the highest risk as well.
Indeed. And also the highest stress, the most stressful as well. So pick your poison.
I can vouch for that. So here's another talk about the CISO as well. So to make their life easier, where should they report into?
Oh, you went there. Okay, I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to this, and I'll explain at the end. What I can tell you, look, all I can say is the CISOs I place, the CISOs I know, and the CISOs I work with, I'm just kind of feeding back what they're what they tell me. But what I can say is that 65% of CISOs in the UK report to either the CIO or the CTO. In the US, because we have an office in the US as well, and I deal with US CISOs, it's slightly less. You're looking at about 45%. It's sometimes seen as a conflict of interest, sometimes because the CTO, the CIO's role is to propel technology to aid the business, and security and CISOs can sometimes be seen as, I wouldn't say business blockers, but rightfully it's their role to assess the technology and to assess how this is going to aid the business and to report on those risks for the business to decide on whether they want to go ahead or not. And these CIOs and these CTOs, they're on the board, and not all CISOs are on the board as well. So any message to the board can often get diluted. So a lot of people don't like that reporting line, even though it's more the norm in the UK. For organizations that are less technology centric, and that may sound strange, but even like legal firms that may not, rely on technology as a product as such, the CISO can report to the CRO, the Chief Risk Officer, and the Chief Legal Officer. And I see that a lot in the US as well. The CISOs I speak to tend to like that because it shows the gravitas and the seriousness that the CISO function commands. If you ask most CISOs, I think they'll tell you they would want to report straight to the CEO. But here's more unusual in the UK, but not so much in the US. That's reporting to the Chief Financial Officer, the CFO. Now, people are in two minds about this. Number one, CFOs, whether right or wrong, they've got a reputation for holding their purses close to them.
So maybe they're first in line for the budget round.
And that's the flip side of the coin. Like, it all depends on your influence and skills. You go straight to the person with the money. So some people would say, good luck getting the cash. Some people would say, actually, I'm right there.
I quite like the idea of a hybrid CFO, CISO role, actually. That might work going forward.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a flyer.
Yeah, but I think in terms of where the role should report it to, it does depend on the organization. But I think we shouldn't be looking at the title. We should be looking at the individual. Many of the CISOs I speak to have got a fantastic CTO that supports them, and others have got a CRO that just doesn't understand or hasn't really shown interest in security. And as long as the person you are reporting to supports you and is an enabler that can help you get the message across, then that's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's quite stark, the percentage that you're giving and still reporting into the technology organization.
Yeah,
you'd think over time that may have evolved. I think in my career I've had the fortunate or misfortune of reporting into all those different lines.
I should be asking you the question then, right?
You can ask me the question. But I think what you say is that very true. It isn't really, there is no right answer.
Yeah.
I think there's probably two kind of considerations here. One is not being too far away from the executive committee. I think everyone wants to report into the CEO. Okay, that's unrealistic because they'll only have 5 minutes of you may not have enough time, and there are many other business decisions, business things that need to happen. But as long as you maybe one removed perhaps, or have a dotted line so that if there is anything of significance, you can have that conversation.
Yes.
And the other thing I noticed as well is it doesn't matter where you report into, because you, as a CISO, it's one of those roles in an organization, you actually have to influence across the board. You have to influence in technology, you have to influence in HR, in people, in legal. So if you're positioned in one place and you're relying on the line to support you, you are closing off your ability to use the line in other parts of the organization. So I think, we'll come on to some of the wider skills, but I think looking at it from a thou shalt report into COO, thou shalt report into the CIO, I think it's thou shalt have the ability to influence at that level, be seen as a senior leader of the organization, be supporting of the business, but also ensuring that the right governance to take into consideration the organizational constraints that exist. So I reported into a CIO and previously, and it was the amazing thing about that was actually I was closer to the action.
Interesting.
So being close to the action had in that organization and that point in time enabled me to influence more directly the change that was required. But that was also about the relationship side as well, and trust.
Yeah, it's funny, and as you said, we will probably get into that a little later, but the best or the most effective CISOs I know, they are people, and they are confident to speak to different people of all levels, and they are articulate as well as highly intelligent, but they've got a high degree of emotional intelligence as well.
So actually, let's delve a little bit more deeper into what are those other personal qualities that make up a good a good CISO or a good leader, because actually the qualities that we're going to talk about apply to more than just a CISO.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that?
I think one of the key aspects is influence and skills as well, because depending on when you put this out, we're in 2024. And
2024.
Yes, that's 5. Security still needs to be demystified to some people in an organization. And one of the key skills, and people have been saying this for years, but is the ability to speak to the business and to articulate technical issues in business terminology, and to ensure that the message you are getting across as a CISO to your key stakeholders is targeted at them, what I would call advanced stakeholder management, so multi-factor authentication. So what does that mean to me? Why should I do it? What policy? What? So what? So
I've got a business to run.
Yeah, exactly.
Get out of my way.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny how this game has evolved, because I remember there was one particular period where the answer to that was, well, GDPR. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to go to jail? But now that's seen as such a crude, way to do business, because this is effectively business. You want to finesse. I'm not a CISO, but this is what they tell me. Like, you want to finesse. You want to be more articulate in your approach. So that's one of the key skills that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. Into being able to communicate in the business language, I think. That's certainly key. Influencing, as you mentioned.
One other thing that strikes me is quite unique from most type of leaders via CISO is that you still need to stay abreast of technology. You still need to stay abreast of the latest threats. Now, there is a massive argument out there of whether a CISO should be technical or not. I'm not going to say anything, but either way, you do need to have a good handle on technology. So you do need technical skills to a certain extent, but technology moves so fast, it's a constant evolving cycle. So you need to be, it feels like there's no rest for the CISO at all, because you need to be on top of everything. You also need to be on top of all the threats specific to your industry sector as well. You need to be on top of wide economic events. You need to be on top of potential business continuity and disaster, from pandemics to warfare, because these are the questions you're asked at board level. So it's a multifaceted role.
I think that certainly resonates, because the fundamentals of security hasn't really
Yeah.
shifted materially. What is shifting is the speed and pace of technology, the speed and pace of adoption, the speed and pace of different ways of working, the introduction of what's almost like the decoupling from a centralized technology
Yes.
stack to, well, actually I've got an app over here, I've got data over there, I send it to XYZ, and it's just being able to keep on top of change.
Yeah.
And going back to your point about, you know, what makes a good CISO, it depends. It also depends on the type of organization they're engaged in as well, because they could be it could be a CISO that's leading a multi-jurisdictional financial services organization that has the luxury of having a team of experts in different domains
Yes.
that they recognize and understand, but their skills and strengths are more important in the communication and the articulation and bringing people together.
That's right.
As well as all the other politics, emotional
Yes.
intelligence, etc., compared to perhaps someone who's maybe in a smaller organization who needs to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say dynamic's the wrong word, a little bit more on top of a lot of different
Yes.
things, multitasked,
Exactly.
multifaceted. Do you find that in
I
your
definitely
experience?
find that, and that goes back to your first question in terms of the expectations from organizations as to what the CISO should do, or their capabilities. In small organizations, there's always an element of rolling up your sleeves to get on with it, no matter what job you're in. And it's not just CISOs, but some leaders from larger organizations, more established and structured organizations, may have some trouble and some challenges in working in a smaller, unorganized / agile, depending on your perspective, organization where, you know, there's not necessarily a massive team below you, where there's not a demarcation of duties, where you're actually sometimes going to roll up your sleeves and get on with it. So back to the first point, it is actually making sure that those clients, those organizations' expectations are actually realistic.
And on the topic of CISOs, obviously there's the security knowledge and business skills. What about understanding of the business and industry and the right fit?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a need to be aligned to different sectors? Or
I think there is a need for that. Two parts of this question. I think you can take that need too far, especially if you're a hiring organization. For purpose's sake, whether CTO, CIO, or anyone who's trying to hire a CISO, sometimes the mandate I get is they need to come from asset management, and this is our main asset class. I want them to have experience of this. Really, security is security. I can understand you saying that they need to have an appreciation of where your revenue stream comes from, but I wouldn't be that finite, that black and white about an approach to say that they must come from one particular industry sector. I mean, there are exceptions to that. If you're looking for FTSE 100 CNI CISO, then perhaps you would want someone from critical national infrastructure, because some of the threats, are more unique, and the ramifications of a breach are far more severe. On the flip side as well, from a CISO looking to change industry, or not just a CISO, any security leader, respect the threats posed to that particular industry sector. One of the best pieces of advice that I got from one of my CISOs during his gardening leave, he looked at all of the breaches affected that particular industry sector for the last 5 years, and that better equipped him to be in front of the board, to have those conversations with key stakeholders, not to put fear in them, but to help them understand that he also understands the business. What keeps them awake at night also keeps him awake. In this case, it was a him, don't worry. Keeps him awake at night as well. So you should do your research into the industry sector, because there are certain threats that are more prevalent in other industry sectors than others. So it's not completely agnostic.
I certainly find as well with CISOs or senior security leadership is that the more you understand the business you're engaged in, the more you can add value to that business, the more you can right size security for that business.
Yes.
So what I've seen happen in the past is someone coming from maybe a government or more of a regulated environment going into perhaps more of a retail organization, and let's just say they understand the security, but what works in one place doesn't work in another.
That's right.
And I think certainly, for the end user organization, sometimes being able to assess what that right fit is for a CISO for their organization isn't just they've worked in this industry or they've worked in this industry. It's, do they have the adaptability and the ability to empathize with the organization and the change that it's going through, so that they can quickly reorientate or reframe, what does security mean for me as a business?
Yes.
Not what does it mean for big retail bank down the road.
Yes, and I'd go so far as to say that they're actually valued more in the organization, because all of a sudden you're a business enabler. What's that phrase? Follow the money. Well, you should follow the money. Not to say that leave your position because this role pays more. When I say follow the money, is how does the organization earn the money? That's how you make your salary. That's how you make your package. Follow the money. Understand that, because it is unique to that industry sector, and those assets must be protected.
And how does it lose money in some respects?
Good point. Yes.
So follow it both ways.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And and the third part is, how can we ensure that the money that they do have is actually spent effectively and wisely? Because unless you have a well-informed leadership team, or very astute with that expertise around security, they could quickly start racking up the dollars or pounds in terms of investment in security without actually seeing the full value or understanding, is that what is good enough?
Yes.
When everyone knows that we need to invest in security, we know when to start, but very few organizations have the ability to go, right, we can stop here. It's good enough for us as an organization. Otherwise it's a never-ending obviously there's always going to be investment in cyber, but that's when you're really in tune with the needs of the business and having those conversations.
It's a tough job, isn't it?
Well,
how do you do it?
But it's no different, when you think about it, it's no different to any other senior leadership job that has to make those same business decisions. Is, am I doing the right thing for the business? How is it adding to the bottom line? Everyone should have a responsibility of, not, in security, we've often had the phrase, it's everyone's responsibility, but it's responsibility for the parts that I'm responsible for, not the whole organization. And I think that's often the trick, is for the CISO to move themselves away from feeling and seeing that they are responsible for everything, and actually empowering everyone else to understand their responsibilities as well in security, and making sure that, unfortunately, legislation regulation now is almost like turning the other way, and leadership is also saying, well, it went wrong on your watch. We've seen so many cases about it went wrong on your watch. Hence the stress, the life,
it's and it's awkward. One of my contacts, what did she say to me? She said that securities, or being a CISO, is a thankless job. Not my words. This is what she said, and she raised a good point. She said that when things go well, and that, guess what, there's no major breach. All right, you've done your job. Well, what do you want? But when things don't go well, it really becomes tough for you. And I'm not trying to paint doom and gloom here, because I haven't seen the mass exodus of CISOs that they were talking about a year ago. The people that do want to get into that role, but it's very challenging, because if you do your job correctly, you may not necessarily get the thanks and recognition that, even if you don't, correctly, that's very subjective. You could do your job correctly and still be a victim of a major breach. It doesn't mean to say you did your job badly. A lot of the times you're not getting the support that you require. You're not getting the budget you require,
But I think it comes back to going back to those key skills about communicating, articulating to the leaders. And I sometimes use the concept in a way, like I call it the intelligent customer, but in someone who really understands what they need from a security function, what they need from a CISO, because then when they do understand that, they can hold them to account, support them, enable them, etc.
Yes. The only thing I'll say to that, sorry,
no, please, go for it.
The only thing I'll say to that is that the CISO themselves, unless there's been a change in the business, which often does as a leadership change, they need to take a level of accountability as well. And that is usually in the selection and interview process. And that this is a two-stage interview. I'm going to be asking the right questions to make sure that I'm not going to be walking into a honey trap. I'm going to be asking, why is this position available? What happened to my predecessor, if there is one? What are your expectations of me in the first 6 months? Who are the key stakeholders? What's my budget for this role? Obviously reporting line and the person you're reporting to in terms of their management style. So there should always be a feeling out process as well. So I would say that there are two sides of the coin here. But that being said, things change. The organization you walked into and joined very quickly. Funny, it could be a large organization and they're slow to change, apart from when something hits the fan, then all of a sudden, boom.
I think where there is change, there is opportunity, and I think being able to, I think that's also an art for a CISO, is sometimes almost not in a negative way, but knowing that how to take advantage of bad news, but not necessarily advantage of bad news, but utilize it and demonstrate it to demonstrate not just the value in what they're doing, because I think it's very difficult sometimes for CISOs to truly demonstrate the value proposition, because they are relying on external data to say, oh, we've been breached, or relying on, oh, you can be fined X amount of dollars or going to jail. So it is, they're in between a rock and a hard place. It's unlike other parts of the business, and to try and demonstrate that value.
Yeah, maybe I should get a new hobby, but I love listening to some of the CISO conversations in regards to how they manage to wangle more budget, and some of the best ones I know, they play politics well. They really do.
It's very political.
Yeah, really political, and the best ones I know can maneuver.
So, what role would you say the wider leadership team have in ensuring that the CISO is supported, enabled, and they're supporting the wider business as well? What's the role of other leaders? Do they just let them get on with it?
No, I think one of the key things they can do, or the key roles they can play, is an acknowledgement, and acknowledging that security isn't a technical issue, it's a cultural issue, and culture starts from the top. So they must also take responsibility that in order to attain a culture of strong security hygiene, that must come from the top, and the CISOs need the support from them as well. I don't remember the exact stats. There was a relatively high percentage of, I think it was in the US, of CEOs who asked for multi-factor authentication to be removed from their account. What kind of image is that? What kind of message is that sending to the organization? they also need to realize that it's particularly in high litigation countries as well, it's a high risk position.
Yeah, I've seen that certainly in the US, the high risk position and the high degree of litigation can actually have the converse effect of doing the right thing. Exactly. because it's all about how do I minimize the accountability?
That's right.
How do I get out of the firing line?
Yeah.
Try to do the right thing,
Yeah.
and it does questions people's, I suppose, not attitude, but risk averse approach.
Yes. It's like a hot potato, isn't it?
It is, but I think that's the disjoint between regulation, legislation, and practicality on the ground. Of course, there's a desire to prevent mass data breaches, mass compromises of information from criminal gangs, organized crime, and nation states. But there's also there has to be a recognize of how you do that. Is not only just the stick approach. It's about how do governments support this as well.
Yes.
How do we create an environment that's conducive for organizations doing the right thing, recognizing that they are autonomous organizations themselves and there to make money. And
yes, that's right. That's right. It might have to be a period of amnesty or something like that.
That sounds good. Yeah, amnesty. Once a year, but I think when you reflect, right, the breaches that you hear about are the ones like the MGM casino breach, right? You know, obviously a high-profile client in the UK, Royal Mail Group last year, and then when you sort of like peel behind the covers or look behind the curtains, you realise that is just the poster boy for all the others.
That's right.
that are being breached.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a BAU activity, and it's how do we kind of like, and I think security professionals in general really need to kind of like communicate. It's not necessarily about being able to protect the organization with Fort Knox. It's about having the right controls and environment and process to minimize the impact of anything that should happen, being able to recover very quickly, not exposing ourselves to a ransomware, knowing where our information is, basics. And it's a lot of it is just down to the basics.
What's that old adage that it's not if you get breached, it's when, right?
Yeah. Yes, it was actually 2 days ago, but thanks for asking it. But, your time will come, don't worry. Your time will come. No, but just going back to the executive team, or the people making decisions who've made the decision to take on this CISO. Okay, they go, right, we've got new CISO. Great. World's going to change.
Okay.
What are the key questions that they should be asking the CISO? What are the key things that they need to hold the CISO to account in order for them, on behalf of the shareholders and wider stakeholders, to have confidence in, right, we've got a good one. Not in a bad way, but I have assurance that we're managing our risks appropriately.
Right, I'll tell you what they shouldn't be doing. That might be easier.
There's a long list of that.
Yeah. They shouldn't be giving them a playbook, and they shouldn't assume that they know the answers. A lot of the times when organizations approach me to say, look, we're looking for a CISO, a lot of times it's off the back of a discovery project by one of the larger consultancies. And it's a case of, all right, we need a CISO, we're at this point, we're at point A, we want to get to point C, and these are the steps we want to get to point C. And when you get a CISO that knows what they're talking about, they typically look at that and say, I don't agree with that. So don't give them a step-by-step playbook, because you don't know. That's not your area of expertise, it's their area of expertise. One of the key questions you should be saying is that this is where we are and this is where we want to get to. how do we get there? And that CISO will then push back on you to say, I need this from you, I need that from you, this is the budget, this is the team I need, this is the buy-in I need. And if you can give that to them, or if you can't give it to them, and a couple of CISOs say that, then the problem, it's not them, it's you, you know. So if they're able to come with a good logical roadmap, then you're certainly on the right path, and it's theirs. You're not, you know, it's theirs because they created it, and so they are confident in delivering in it. So there's no excuses should they not deliver it. It was their idea.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think also adding to that is being able to demonstrate how that investment improves your risk posture,
Yes.
your ability to demonstrate compliance if you have a requirement to comply with this standard, that standard, this regulation, that legislation.
Yes.
There's usually that driver.
Yes.
And being able to, and the third dynamic I would say is, okay, well, how what you are proposing is actually going to enable and support the wider business strategy.
Agreed.
I think that one piece is where the whole business understanding is so important.
Yes.
Because it's great that you can do this because you'll be compliant. That's great. Chief risk officer's happy, compliance officer's happy.
Yes.
Yes. Other parts of the business going, well, how's that going to help me?
Yeah.
So it's really going to be so as well with the plan. I always think it's important that there is, you know, is asking the CISO is make sure that they have defined and documented a clear cybersecurity strategy that can be supported and communicated and bought into by the executive, aligned with the business strategy, with a prioritized improvement plan based on business benefit, based on economic environment, and based on really moving the needle forward and right sizing for the organization. The other key question I think a senior leader should always be asking is how can I help?
Yeah.
I think so many, and it's a natural inclination for many leaders, but actually that's the key question. That's the key question to ask a CISO. What do you need from me? As well as holding into account what do you need from me to help you make this happen?
Yeah.
Not just them, but what do you need from my team to help you make this happen?
Yeah.
And the visible support in the organisation to do that.
And as someone who speaks to, unfortunately, some unhappy CISOs in their position, looking to leave, that one question changes everything. Yeah. Well, that one question does change everything.
You got to look at it. I'm always like to be optimistic. Look at the positive. Look at the positives and everything. Whether it changes opportunity, not just for business, but also for the organisation, because CISOs, you know, I find that there are CISOs that are great at different phases of an organisation as well. So when it gets to a BAU or more operational, sustainable, or where there is a requirement for impact, fast impact, mergers and acquisitions, different stages.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's when sometimes I would suggest we'll get a contract interim CISO, especially when it's a scale of a ramping up change. You want a CISO that has been there, done that in multiple organizations, and can turn it to a relative state of BAU, so then you can take your time and find your permanent, or relative BAU, and then find your permanent CISO. There's a CISO for everything.
Great. And it's just matching them to the right places. That's the thing. It's like it's a bit like chess. So going forward, how do you see the role of the CISO evolving, or maybe just obviously looking from your experience in the industry for quite a while now, how's it changed, or where do you see it going?
I've seen it change where it's very clear now that the CISO is and should be a business enabler, and should be supported by the business, and should be supported by senior executives. Gone are the days where it was a case of just being associated with network security, or just being affiliated with IT, or just seen as a stepchild to the IT department. In terms of where it's going, I'll be frank with you, that's a little bit up in the air at the moment. One thing we are seeing high levels of stress among CISOs. We're seeing greater threats out there. We are seeing more litigation. We're seeing more regulation. We're seeing more legislation, which all in all piles up on the CISO. So one thing we should be seeing certainly is more support to the CISO, and fingers crossed higher budgets as well. But I think I'll be disingenuous if I just had a straight answer for that in regards to where the CISO is going. I feel it's quite unknown.
I think it's...
what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
What do I think? It's a complicated picture. I think the CISO needs to become a master of many different things that perhaps they weren't already today. And I think the ability for a CISO to be more agile and dynamic in terms of what they take on, because it is a business role.
Yes.
It's about understanding cross business. I think the CISO I think the skills of a CISO will need to develop more into the leadership stuff a lot more, and a lot more understanding of how to get the best out of people, recognizing that they're never going to know everything. No one does.
Yeah.
But they've got to know what they don't know, and they've got to be humble enough to know what they don't know, and start looking at how they can make change and empower others, whether they have direct reporting accountability or whether there are other parts of the organization. I think maybe more in terms of, I think there's always a push for professionalization of cybersecurity, like every other industry. But then in professionalization of cybersecurity, then you're looking at multitude of different entities trying to professionalize cybersecurity in multiple different ways. And then there's questions around when is a CISO when they're now responsible for wider physical security, operational resilience. Actually, you know what? Just take it all on. Just run the business. Okay. So I think the flexibility. I think we use the title CISO today to kind of like put like a little umbrella term, but in reality, going back to your point, there is no one CISO. It's just like, we call it this, but actually your roles and responsibilities are this, and you're going to have to work out what else we need you to do, or what you think we need to do based on the organizational context, the industry, and specific legislation. So it's almost like going to be like an umbrella framework term. Is
interesting. Was it have roles by any other designation will still smell the same, right?
And I think going back to your point, it's like, it's not about the title. The title is just a way to communicate some kind of requirement, and while it works in some respects to communicate the requirement, say I need a CISO, like yourself in your industry, you still need to have the conversation that says, what do you really need? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, actually, because I don't know whether it's quite devil's advocate, but I deal with heads of information security who specifically want to leave for the CISO title. And I've seen some people I speak to, they don't care. As long as I'm the more senior person in security, that's all I care about. Others specifically want and fight for the CISO title. Now,
wow.
On the flip, they do. On the flip side of the coin, some organizations, they present me with what they're looking for, and they'd slap CISO on it, and I say, look, this isn't a CISO, but if they're a service company or MSSP, sometimes they want to say to their customers, don't worry about the supply chain risk. You can trust us because we've got a CISO. Let us present our CISO, right?
For the account, which just happens to be a contract manager for the security obligations.
That's what I'm saying.
And point, some of them are quite good at that role. But I think it is selling.
And also sometimes when when I am searching for a CISO, I often need to educate them, the people I'm recruiting for, to say, look, just because this person hasn't got CISO in the title, they are effectively CISO all but titles. So you need to see them.
Yeah, I think for me, it just comes back to making sure the people who are making those decisions are well enough informed, or have the trust in, like yourselves and other people, to know this is what I really need, or even take the interim route and say, look, it's a key role, we want to get it right, let's have someone or an external consultancy just provide a bit of advice. I say provide a bit of advice, but what tends to happen is the more advisors you have, how many different views you're going to get.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
There's going to come a point in time where the business decision maker needs to kind of like take accountability themselves in going, right, this is what I do need, and they need to educate themselves as to what a CISO and a leader they need for their organisation.
Yeah.
Okay. What piece of advice, one or two piece of advice would you give to those aspiring to be a CISO?
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll debate what that actually means. To those future leaders or those aspiring to be a CISO, what would you advise them to do?
The biggest advice I'd give is to recognize that if you do want to be a CISO, you are now a leader or executive in an organization that knows security. You're no longer necessarily a security SME that knows a little bit about the business. And with that in mind, and I'm going to touch on this actually, one of the changes I have seen, back to your earlier point, is that there's less emphasis on technical certifications when it comes to searching for a chief information security officer. We all know that one big certification that's inch deep and a mile wide. People still look for that to a certain extent. But what's actually more attractive is really more business orientated certifications. Show me that you can understand the universal language of finance. You do have an MBA. Well, that's very appealing. You put all that time and effort into understanding how a business really operates. I'm interested. Those seem to be, so we're moving away from the, I guess, black and white technical requirement. So that in itself should show you, yes, by all means, if you enjoy being technical, keep enjoying being technical, but the first and foremost is that you are now a business executive, if you want to go down that route.
No, I agree. I also find that those people perhaps with an entrepreneurial mindset as well, who can think quickly outside the box, understand the breadth of business functions, and see it as a business.
Yes.
And understand it's a business.
Yes.
Are at an advantage.
Yes.
From the off.
I agree.
As well as with having, some sound knowledge of security does help. But saying that, professional, CISOs sometimes work their way up through the ranks in an organization as well. So
definitely.
Their power is the ability to have such a deep understanding of their business.
That's right.
And build those relationships over a number of years.
Yeah.
And that's worth its weight in gold just as much as having an external person coming in. They're both the right answer for the right type of organization, depending on the stage and where you are on your journey as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a thought or two. I like provoking a few thoughts. Okay. Maybe just to finish off on one final question. So, if I'm a CEO, actually, I am a CEO.
Yes, you are.
Let's remind myself, right? What are the top couple of points or top pointers you would give a CEO in terms of selecting and choosing who is going to be my next CISO?
The first point I would say is turn to an expert for that.
Okay.
Turn to an expert to identify your CISO, and this isn't a knock on internal recruitment teams or anything like that. but you want to have a selection, a breadth of the market, depending on how serious this hire is for you. And it should be serious if you're hiring a CISO. And with that, it should be ideally on a search capacity, so that you can make sure you pull away, or you're in the experience knowing that you are looking at the best available group of candidates that are available at that particular point of time. That's important. The second piece of information, second piece of advice I'd give is that these CISOs you're interviewing, they have choices. It's a role in which you are sought after, so realize it's a two-way interview process. And if you don't have what they're looking for, if you are not in a position to support them, if your business is not culturally sound enough to support them or structured in a way to support them, then that's a learning process for you as well that will only aid your business moving forward. So approach with a wee bit of humility.
No, that makes perfect sense. No, thank you. No, I think that's a helpful piece of advice. If ever I should be looking for a CISO myself.
Good rates.
Very helpful to understand that too. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Owanate. It's been a real pleasure having you today, and look forward to having many more conversations, discussions in future.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
No, any time. Yeah. Well, if you can make it on time, that is. Okay. We'll keep that on quiet. It's fine. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and until next time on another series of another episode of Unexpected Perspectives. Until next time, thank you.